about to proceed. So welcome back. We're going to begin our last section of today's events with a panel discussion. So I asked advisors and editorial consultants for the JJRS if they would be willing to participate in a panel discussion to discuss, the past, present, and future of the study of Japanese religions. And I provide them with a very, admittedly, broad and vague set of questions just to see what they would come up with. And so these questions were organized in three categories, temporal categories, past, present, and future. So for the past, I asked them, because they each have experiences working with the JJRS in different capacities. And so I asked them to reflect on their experiences with the JJRS or working with Hayashi Sensei or Paul in some way. But I also asked them to then maybe think about how the JJRS has affected their careers for better or worse. So hopefully better, since they joined us today. And then also what impact they think the JJRS has had on the study of religion. Both Paul and Hayashi Sensei discussed that as well. So if they have thoughts on that, I would like to hear it. And then for the present, I wanted to move more towards the state of the field of Japanese religions and the role that the JJRS is currently playing and what kind of trends they see in the field and how that they may be involved in that. Hayashi and Paul both talked about that as well. Also, what types of research they would like to see us publishing, either in terms of topics or methodologies or technologies, and also any challenges that they see, not just for the study of Japanese religions, academic research in general, or journals like ours that are free and open and unaffiliated. And for the future, well, we'll see what we get to when we get to the future. So I asked them to think about where do they see, based on their personal experience, where they might see the field going in terms of topics. And likewise, journals like the JJRS, what might we need to adapt to, or they have any suggestions like that. That's kind of for my own personal fit. And then, if they want to make any predictions about where the study of Japanese religions will be in the next decade or 2 decades, or what we really want to push it further than that, you're welcome. So I thought we would start just in order. It's listed on the program, which is alphabetical order.
To give my comments of organizational structure, I think I'm going to structure them in the context of the production of knowledge and what influences the production of knowledge. And today I was reading the newspaper and I had a little shock. And the shock was that today is the 30th anniversary of the wedding of the emperor. And I was in Japan then, and I remember that day very clearly. And I was like, holy cow, 30 years have passed. And that was also the year that I graduated from Nanzan. I was a student at Nanzan from 1989 to 1993. Peter Kanet Sensei was my Shido Kyokan in the Jinrei Gakka, the anthropology department here. And I took my first graduate seminar with Paul Swanson and Jim Heisig, who were doing a small seminar on interreligious dialogues that they let me participate in. And I'm thinking about, in terms of the production of knowledge, what allowed me to do that? There's 2 things that allowed me to do that. One was the fact that I'm a native English speaker and I can teach English, because I paid for my university tuition and my living expenses because I could teach English and make enough money to pay for it. That would not have been an option for much of the world who's not a native English speaker. So that's the kind of the general social structure that allowed that to happen. The more specific social structure that allowed that to happen is that when I took the entrance exam here at Nanzan, I did not do well. And 2 anthropology professors were very concerned about letting me in. And I had a friend whose father was a local politician. And they called him up because he was my my sponsor in Japan. They called him up and they said, we're not really sure that Clark can actually handle, the university here as a regular Japanese. And he said to them, he said that I will take responsibility for it. I will take responsibility. If he does not work out, you can blame it on me. And if it weren't for those kind of factors beyond my own control, I never would have been able to come here and experience really a great 4 years. I know there's a lot of negative talk about Japanese universities, but I thought I had a very good 4 years here and I learned a lot. And one of the things that I learned here from when I took the graduate seminar with Paul is intellectual joy that can come from work, this kind from academic work. There was such a joy in the way that I remember Paul and Jim leading that seminar. But in terms of the past, how this relates to the past of the JJRS, the production of knowledge. I'm watching the clock there. I'll make sure I don't take up too much time. Is thinking about this in terms of the production of knowledge. How did the JJRS grow? And I'm not going to, Hayashi Sensei said a lot of the things in terms of the history that I won't repeat, but I think there's two things that are worth pointing out. There was a major shift from the first, 12 years of the journal, from sociology, a lot of the sociological studies, to the journal becoming very historical and lots of articles on the history of Buddhism and religion in Japan. How does that happen? Well, it happens because Paul went to an American university and was able to have all these connections both in Japan and America. It allows that the journal to really kind of spread out. And to think about what would have happened to the journal had that not happened, had it just stayed, let's say, in the hands of a priest who was a sociologist. It would have been a very different journal. The second thing I want to say about the past, which I think is very important and has not been recognized so far, is Nanzan University has given a lot of money over the past, many decades to make sure this journal came out and was free or was very cheap. And that does not happen very much. So when we think about the production of knowledge and the power behind the production of knowledge, that does not happen with a lot of university support, a lot of university financial support. And related to that is the idea that because the university gave all this financial support to allowing this journal to happen, to allowing there to be a copy editor, that a field under Paul's leadership was formed in which you could write a very technical article on Japan and have an audience. One of the things that journals do is they create an audience. They just don't serve an audience, they also create an audience. And what the JJRS did is it created an audience in the past. It created a subfield. There may not be a subsection of the American Academy of Religion just for Japanese religions without the JJRS. I don't know. But I can certainly say with a lot of confidence is that there was a subfield created because of the JJRS. Okay. Briefly, the present and the future, and then I'll turn over my comments. The present. Structure of knowledge, production of knowledge. In the present, one of the challenges we're facing, and I'll just focus on the challenge question, is that the humanities are not doing well. This is the challenge. This is a serious challenge for the future of our field. It's a serious challenge for the future of education. How do we respond to that? I'll keep that brief. I have other things to say, but My colleagues are probably wondering when I'm going to give them the microphone. Okay, finally, the future. Two things I want to say about the future. One is in terms of what are the basic problems that we're dealing with as a field going forward. If you look at the list of special issues, there are lots of topics there. But what I think would be really interesting is to go through those and think, okay, what are the kind of the shared problems that we've been looking at that we have not made explicit? They're implicit, but not made explicit. One of the problems that's been made explicit is kind of this problem that Paul mentioned earlier, what is religion? Or more specifically, what is Shukyo? And so the point that I want to make there is, I want to ask this. What is Mushukyo? Most Japanese people say they're Mushukyo. And most scholars of religion think that they know what they mean by that. That they're not really, it doesn't really mean they're not religious. It just means they don't understand something as religious that we understand it to be religious. But then, in a sense, it's dismissing their point of view, which I think we should start taking a little more seriously. Final thing, and I won't go into this in just detail, but I just want to highlight it. A future issue, artificial intelligence is going to change a tremendous amount about the way we do research over the next 10 years. Research is not going to be doing, the way people are getting their PhDs now are going to be doing research in 20, 30 years, it's going to look different. And I think we should pay attention to that and not think of it as an enemy, but think about it as the aliens are here. We have to live with them.
Okay, so the question is past, present, and future. So I will speak about 3 issues roughly in accordance to those questions. So first of all, perhaps I should bring young Hayashi Sensei's picture. Show here. So he omitted his part in the play or history of JJRS. And then I asked him why, and he said he is just an observer. But we can never be observer, right? So Sensei worked, contributed many things to the JJRS, and then we really appreciate his service and then future service and thing. That said, perhaps I'm expected to talk about how Japanese graduate school or Japanese scholars use or don't use JJRS. So I bring up this issue. So Hayashi Sensei's presentation ends in 1990s. And I'm trained in the late 1990s to early 2000s. And I'm kind of surprised to see that so Yanagawa and his students contributed many articles to JJRS in the past, but recently I don't think many Japanese scholars contributed to JJRS. And that's partly because more JJRS tends to focus on more specific topics, and as I mentioned, the age of generalists passed away. So we are more focused on specific topics. But in reversal, perhaps we just some Japanese students or scholars just think JJRS is specific topics for specific topics and not for general discussion or something. So in my personal experience, in my graduate students' days, a few decades ago, well, they may read English articles, but those are leaning towards more theoretical framework or something, and not really a specific topic on Japanese origins. So if we take the courses about Japanese origins courses, they may read Japanese translation or English works, but they will not use JJRS articles. So I don't know what the word will explain this gap or distance or whatever between academia of Japanese works or Japanese scholars on Japanese origins and English-speaking scholars on Japanese origins. So in the past, so I believe there is some distance for them. However, in the present, as only one hand, I'm working on modern period. So the cases or researchers are more conscious about the trans-locative or transnational space. So if we are working on the modern Buddhism, and Kinda-Bukkyo is, of course, as you said, contributed to the book, Kinda-Bukkyo, and Oregon Samurai, the scholars here. And then, of course, modern Buddhist scholars of modern Buddhism working with transnationally and the cases of modern Buddhism. So they travel to other countries, they come to Japan, and then they read English books, and they read French books, and translate it in Japanese. So, of course, we need to think different language, and we must focus on the issue of translation. And so, since the 2000s or late 1990s, of course, there was the issue of the concept of religion. So, much as I mentioned, and then Paul Sanchez as I mentioned, so what is Shuka and what is religion? And some researchers are working on their genealogy of the concept of religion, Shuka, in Japan. And of course, it needs a transnational cooperation interpreting this kind of things. And practically speaking, in Japanese universities, they try to push young students or scholars, junior scholars, to publish in English, as you know, you may know. So many Japanese students or graduate students or junior scholars are somehow eager to publish in English. Then, so they so far, I don't think systematically Japanese graduate school mainly using Japanese language educate how to write in English or how to write English essays or something like that. But some students or scholars are trying to this issue. And then I believe JJRS is open access and 15 years of excellent papers accumulated. So it's a model database for writing in English. I still believe JJRS is not suitable for young Japanese scholars to publish his first English paper, but because it's too prestigious, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what to say. But yeah, I personally, some young graduate students ask me how to write English papers or something like that. And I always say, read first. It's not just translating Tategaki or Yokoga. So if you just write Japanese paper and then translate English, and it will make no sense answer English academic paper. But we don't know. Most Japanese students don't know how to write. So in the future, I think JJRS can be work as a database for Japanese eager students, so that the search function, stronger search function would be nice to have. That's the for the future. So that's the end.
Thank you. My name is Keller Kimbrough, and I'm a professor at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And I'm a little bit different from everybody else on this panel, I think, and that I'm really not a religious studies person. I don't have any particular expertise in religious studies or Buddhism. I'm a scholar of literature, and my area is Chusei Bungaku. I work on particularly late medieval fiction, prose fiction, 15th, 16th, and then 17th century, getting a little bit into Kinsei. But of course, this literature is Buddhist. You can't separate the Buddhism from the literature. And to understand the literature, you have to understand the social, cultural, religious context, the history of the period. Okay, so I come at this kind of from a different perspective. If I tell you about, my background, how I came to be involved with the JJRS at Nanzan, it really goes back to when I was in graduate school. So I was a student at Yale. I studied with Ed Kamens there. And while I was there, I happened to take a course with Stanley Weinstein, who's a scholar of Buddhism, and he did very sort of orthodox. He read commentaries and commentaries on commentaries and this sort of thing. But not what we would think of today as popular religion or Shinbutsu Shugo. These sorts of issues were not things that he was interested in necessarily, and God forbid gender, something like that. That would never come up. Okay, but I enjoyed this. I liked it. So I liked studying Buddhism. And I actually contemplated studying with him, writing my dissertation under him. And I brought this up at one point. And I said, I'd be interested in, maybe I could write a dissertation on Buddhist Setsuwa, which eventually is what I did, but not with him. And he laughed and he said, "Are you kidding?" He said, "What would you write about? Lecherous monks?" And this is just absolutely absurd from a religious studies perspective that one would pursue something like this. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. That's what interested me, is that I've always loved literature. I love stories, and I particularly enjoy stories that could be more off color or that are challenging to taboos. There are all sorts of things about these stories that are interesting. But he wouldn't even entertain the thought. This was crazy. Okay, so I wrote my dissertation. Some time goes by. I finished I graduated in December of 1999. And I wrote an article on what I called Waka Dharani theory, trying to move past Kotodama thought to a different, idea of the way Waka worked in magical ritual contexts. And then Paul accepted it for the JJRS. And I happened to meet shortly after that. I met Paul in Vienna at an EAJS conference. That was in 2005. And I had also arranged to take a year off between taking my old position at Colby College, new position at University of Colorado. I arranged to take a year off to work on my first book. And I arranged to be a fellow here, visiting research fellow at the Nanzan Institute. Okay, so I came here 2005, and I ended up staying off and on. I was here for 2 full years, another semester, and then I think pretty much every summer from 2005 through 2014. So there was a 10-year period where this was my home. And I have to say, from the very beginning, it was home. It showed up at that time. So Paul was editing the journal. Ben Dorman was copy editing. Jim was a ubiquitous presence in the office. You could tell if he was in or out by the pipe smoke in the hallway. Peter Kniech Sensei here, who was editing Asian folklore studies at the time, was on the 3rd floor. And it was a great home. It was wonderful. Okay, what I found about the journal, though, in the Institute was the inclusivity. And this was really great because whereas before I felt that my interests in Buddhist culture or history didn't fit in with what Weinstein was doing at Yale or Terry Kleeman at the University of Colorado, a colleague there. I brought up, he was talking about something about Buddhism, and I said offhandedly as an assistant professor, I said, well, in medieval Japan, of course, it wasn't like that. And he cut me off and he said, that's not Buddhism. He said that what they were doing in medieval Japan is not Buddhism. That's some weird folk religion from medieval Japan. And okay, so this is what I was facing. I came here and there was an open-mindedness and inclusivity that was really wonderful. And so I kept coming back. And over time, I guess in that 10-year period, I published 3 articles in the journal. I think I published then 1 article with Peter in Asian Folklore Studies. I published numerous book reviews. I guest edited a special issue in 2009. And I got to explore these issues that I was interested in, which are really important. And I think that which led me to believe that the situation was far more complicated if we were to talk about medieval Japanese Buddhism than I learned about in graduate school. When you read stories, when you read popular fiction, you're reading about celebrity icons. You're reading about a Buddhist culture, a religious culture that's not focused on doctrine or sectarian concerns, but in popular belief in particular images at particular sites. The statue of Shakyamuni at Seiryoji, right? The statue of Amida Buddha at Seiganji, the Kiyomizu Kannon, the Hasedera Kannon, the Benzaiten at Chikubushima. I mean, these are very important icons, very important sites, places of great belief and miracles. And then there's this whole world of writing about this. So this is sort of what I pursued, and I'm still working on this to this day. It's all very interesting. Okay, so Shubunken became a home for me, it wasn't all just scholarship though necessarily. We had a good time in those years. Jim scored tickets for the Rolling Stones through a former student for the entire institute. There was a sign-up sheet. Everyone in the institute was invited to see the Rolling Stones when they played in Nagoya. That was really fun. All sorts of things, lunches at Downey's, great conversation. We just probing ideas, exploring things. And for me, I mean, originally one of the questions is, how did this affect your career? How did the institute or the journal play an impact in your own development? And for me, this was it was a place where I received training. I mean, it was like a kind of postgraduate training over these years where I learned about publishing. I learned about copy editing, working with Ben and Paul and Jim, and about how to lay out a book. Jim helped me with the images for my first book, talked to me about all sorts of issues related to that. And because of this, because of the knowledge I gained here, when I was at Colorado later, I organized a conference and I said, hey, we should do a conference volume. I realized that there was no publisher who wanted to publish this. And I published it myself because I knew how to do this from being at Shubunken. And that's a volume called Publishing the Stage. I actually started my own book series with this. Still only one volume in the book series. That one volume it was a volume that I co-edited with Satoko Shimazaki, who's at UCLA now. But anyway, we published it through the University of Colorado Center for Asian Studies. It's volume 1 of the Boulder Books on Asian Studies series. We got an ISBN code. I was able to hire David White, later copy editor for the JJRS, to do the layout. It's a beautiful volume. We ended up giving away several hundred copies. I never actually sold it, but we put it. Okay, so I'm being long-winded, but it's hard for me to overstate how important the Institute and the JJRS has been in my career. I haven't been back much since 2014. I ended up for several years working closely with faculty at the Kokugakuin University in Tokyo and Tachikawa. Then more recently, I spent a year, I guess 4 years ago now, at Nichi Bunken. But again, this place and the journal are very close. Great, and I'm very it's bittersweet to see Paul retire. So, but hopefully the journal's in good hands.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Stone, retired from the revision department at Princeton University. I recall very clearly the first time I read an entire issue of the JJRS from cover to cover. It was December of 1987. I had just quit my day job to concentrate on writing my dissertation, and I was on a plane to attend the second international conference on the Lotus Sutra, where I met Paul Swanson for the first time. Of course, I knew the name Paul Swanson. I had read his book, Flowering the Two Truths Theory in Chinese Chentai Buddhism many times already. He was a beacon in the dark for somebody working on that area. But since that initial experience, the JJRS has really been central to my own career and my development as a scholar. In preparation for today, I did a search on my name at the website, and I found out that I was guest co-editor for 2 special issues. I published 5 articles, 1 translation of one of Kuroda Toshio's articles, and 5 book reviews. And so this was very important in giving me not only a venue to publish, but a real sense of editorially what goes into writing a good journal article. And I really have to say, of course, I've published in other journals as well, and there's just something unique about the care, the investment of effort, the vast expertise, and the way that things are handled at JJRS. And I think that both Paul and Matt, as well as his successor, certainly Clark, when he was on board as associate editor, strike a wonderful balance between allowing the author or the guest special issue editor to have their own vision and yet reining in things and correcting things that could be more clearly expressed, which is really amazing. I first published in JJRS as a result of being roped into a special issue. That was George Tanabe's Conflict in Japanese Religions. He wanted to push back against the idea that Japanese religion is so harmonious. And for a young scholar this was so valuable. I think this is one particular area in which JJRS has excelled, not only in the special issues, but it's a way that younger scholars have been given a venue, and not only a venue, but training in course for the process of how to write a good journal article. And as somebody who has had to write a lot of recommendation letters for tenure and jobs for younger colleagues, it's so valuable to be able to say, and she published, an article in the flagship journal of our field. It really makes a difference. I think that JJRS has directly or indirectly fostered the growth of so many younger colleagues in the field. Just shifting to the present, I don't think there would be a field of Japanese religions without the JJRS, or if there is, it would look very different. If the field of Japanese religions is bigger today than the JJRS, then that's due to the success, I think, of the journal. This is due, I think, in large measure to the fortunate coincidence of who was at the helm. Hayashi Sensei has already mentioned the formative influence of Paul Swanson, in that here was somebody who, as a Buddhologist, was able to incorporate very specialized text-based research into the JJRS, knew how to incorporate that. Paul also, this is the man of many hats. The people in Buddhist studies, like myself, know him as someone who invested 30 years of his life in translating Juri's Mohorjiguan, the great Calming and Contemplation, arguably one of the most important works in the history of East Asian Buddhism. His name is going to live on long after the rest of us have been forgotten. For those of us of my generation, we know that he has another area of expertise. I think he can quote you any line from any song by Bob Dylan, presciently, seeing what the Nobel Prize Committee would eventually recognize. But his expertise, not only with the Buddhist studies, but with having being rooted in both the Japanese and the Anglophone scholarly worlds in a way that was quite rare in his generation, I think really, really made a difference. And with Hayashi Sensei, I think those of you who work on early modern Japanese religion may know his work better than I do, but from my perspective, this is someone who has an unrivaled insight into the history of the study of Japanese religion and Japanese Buddhism. I have learned so much from his essays on how the history of Buddhism developed in Japan in the context of a transnational environment. I also think that in a way very rare for scholars of his Japanese scholars of his generation, Hayashi Sensei has really reached out to and collaborated with foreign scholars in providing journal articles and attending conferences and presenting and critiquing our work. He has twice been discussant for presentations that I've given. And, on modern Nichirenism, probably way outside his field, but the questions that he raised for me are things that I still wrestle with. And so I think the combination of those two folks, really has made a huge difference. I think moving on to the future, I would certainly echo Clark's statement that whatever challenges the JJRS faces are going to be subsets of the larger issues facing the humanities. I hope that the journal will continue to include Japanese scholarship. I think this has been so important in fostering real collaboration and real awareness. And that has just been such a tremendous contribution. I hate to raise the issue of book reviews because I know that there's such a headache for that to arrange, but this is so important, especially for younger scholars. And I think it's fantastic, for example, in a recent issue that we have Paul Swanson, who's a senior expert on Shugendo, reviewing a book by a very young and upcoming scholar, Frank Clements in Shugendo, or we have reviews of Japanese books. I think that the right review can make just such a huge difference. Personally, I'd always be happy to see more articles on Buddhist doctrine or intellectual issues. I do think that one of the great strengths of the journal that I hope will continue is its methodological plurality. And it covers not only the whole historical sweep of Japanese religions, but can accommodate many different disciplines. I think that's really a great strength. I did want to push a little further on one point that Paul Swanson raised about, isn't there something theoretically in the study of Japanese religions that might apply more broadly to religion in general? And I think this is an issue that certainly, Jolyon here and Jason Josephson have mentioned that there are ways that people are not aware of it, that the study of Japanese religion has helped shape the study of religion elsewhere. Am I right in thinking that the category of new religions, new religious movements itself originated in the study of Japanese religion? So I don't know if it's possible, but special issue, just something to consider, something that would show how what we do might contribute to insights in the study of religion more broadly. I'm going to stop there.
First, I can have a chance to respond to some of your comments real fast. So first of all, I'm glad that Mark mentioned this, because actually I think I had a tussle on Twitter recently kind of about this topic about support of journals and why so many journals are incorporated or gobbled up by conglomerates and companies, and some of these are quite predatory. And I think Paul mentioned the term open access, which used to be this thing that meant it was openly accessible, but now it means that your university or your institution or someone pays lots and lots of money, so then you can access it. But thanks to Nanzan, the reason that we're able to produce the JJRS and to make it free for everyone is because Nanzan pays my salary. Thank you very much. As well as allows us to hire an associate editor and have an editorial staff. So I think that is very rare. It is maybe perhaps an older model that universities used to do. But I think it's a case of where something from the past. I'm not a traditionalist at all. That's a place where I would like to see a tradition revived by institutions, especially. I'm not going to call it any institution, but there are some American universities that have the money. I think they could hire some editors and pay them to publish journals as opposed to outsourcing to various companies that I will name here should be suited. But yeah, so I really thank Nanzan and thank the university enough for providing us that leeway to produce the journal as well as other publications. We also have a book series with the University of Hawaii Press. We produce the whole thing here, and then Hawaii publishes it, but that wouldn't be possible. Another thing I wanted to mention, several of you hit on this point about I call it the diversity or the inclusivity of the JJRS. This is something that I think Paul pioneered, and I'm endeavoring to continue. And I think in my opinion, is the strength of the journal is that we want to publish materials from people in different fields, different historical periods. I'm really excited when I can publish an issue that has, something about, Yayoi period archaeology and, religion in anime in the same issue. That's awesome. So I really encourage people who can do subfields or methodologies, recently received really excellent manuscripts from art historians, which who often don't contribute to journals on religion, but as Keller pointed out about literature, same with medieval Japanese art, you can't separate that from religion. They're wonderful pieces. So that's something that we at least I aspire to make the journal accessible for people and also other fields, history, literature, and I think maybe that's a small part of what we can contribute to the humanities in general. Not just like so many Gakkai publications. We focus on modern religion, where we focus on medieval literature, but I think that the JJRS is plus and contribution to humanities in general is that I always tell authors if they ask if their topic is acceptable, it's like, if you talk about religion in Japan or Japanese religion defined broadly somewhere in the world or space or somewhere, we can consider it. It's based on the quality of the article. So I'm glad people brought that up. Another key point to the success of the journal, of course, is Paul and Hayashi, and I think their collaboration. Because not only did both of them bring different perspectives to the journal, but I think also allowed the journal to kind of straddle the very different academic worlds of Japan and especially the US and Europe as well. And I think that kind of collaboration is something that is inspirational and something that we should engage in more, and especially for those of us who are working in Japan with Japanese colleagues. So that's a good point. And then finally, Hoshino Sensei, talked about Japanese scholarship, and then Jackie mentioned it as well. So especially in some of the earlier issues of the journal, there was a lot more material from Japanese scholars, and it has waned recently. Special issues are a great place where we can incorporate material from Japanese scholars, things that have been published in Japanese, but we can translate into English. And of course, one difficulty is the translation process. As we found that often with special issues, it takes considerably longer. You have to translate the article and then work with the translator and then the author. But they're usually quite good scholarship, especially as a replacement for that. Since I've been here, I've never once received a submission from a Japanese scholar or a scholar working in Japan who's from the Japanese Academy, only in special issues. So maybe it's intimidating, or maybe because since I said students don't often aspire to have those things in English as much as they could, but I would look forward to receiving more submissions from Japanese scholars. So that's all I have to say. And if anybody we have quite a bit of time. If anybody has any comments about the panel discussion or Hayashi or Paul's talks, I would like to open it up.